When you're involved in a personal injury case, you want to know what is the process that's involved in filing a personal injury lawsuit. Well, my name is Robert Gluck, and I've been filing personal injury lawsuits for people here in Florida since 1989. The process begins without a lawsuit. The first step is to see if your case is going to settle without a lawsuit. But if your case gets to the point where either your lawyer tells you they've made a final offer in your case and that number is not acceptable to you, or for whatever reason a lawsuit has to be filed in your personal injury case, the very first thing that happens is your lawyer prepares a document called a complaint. A complaint is the document where your lawyer alleges what it is that the other party did wrong, where he alleges and he tells everybody how much the claim is worth. He tells everybody where it happened. He tells everybody whether a jury trial is requested, and he tells everybody whether you suffered damages as a result. And he puts that, or she, puts that in a written document called a complaint, which is basically the lawsuit that gets filed. And now we have an interesting way of filing lawsuits. It used to be that a lawyer would send a clerk down to the courthouse, and they would take a piece of paper and they would hand it to the clerk and they would put a stamp on it, and you would pay them a filing fee and your case was filed. Well, today we sit in our office and we send our documents through the computer. So there is an e-filing system in Florida where we file our complaint online. Then the clerk issues something called a summons. The summons is a document that is then handed to a sheriff. The sheriff then takes that summons and goes out in the field and looks for the defendant that is being sued to hand them the lawsuit. The summons is the document that tells them, hey, you're being sued, and you've got 20 days to answer this lawsuit by filing your own paper in the clerk's office. So the sheriff has to go out and hand that paper to the person you're suing. Sometimes it's hard to find them. Sometimes they hide when they know you're trying to sue them. And sometimes if they hide enough and you can't find them, you could still sue them. And there's a process for doing that if you think they're evading service or trying to avoid you. But once they get served with the lawsuit, then they've got 20 days to file their paper saying why it's not their fault and why they don't owe as much money as you say they do. And then we go forward with the process called discovery. Discovery is where each party gets to ask in writing questions to the other side and demand that the other side provide documents. In an accident case, they might ask you to produce your medical records. They might ask you to list the names of all your doctors, all the jobs you've had, all the places you've lived. They're going to search and look to see if there's any evidence you've had old injuries that you didn't tell them about. So they're kind of going to go on a fishing expedition through this discovery process. And then we get to ask them questions about their driving record of the defendant, for example, and what evidence they have in the case. And we get to take the deposition, a verbal deposition of the other driver. They get to take your deposition. That's where you sit in a room and you have to answer questions about what happened. Then after that, you might have to be examined by one of their doctors. The defense has the right to have you examined by their doctor to see if they agree if you're injured. And then at some point, the judge is going to require you to go to a mediation. That's a process where you try and settle your case informally without an actual jury trial. And then if the mediation isn't successful, you go in front of the judge and say, Judge, we've tried everything. We haven't been able to resolve the case. We're ready for a jury trial. And then the judge would bring 20 people into a room from the community and you'd pick a jury. You'd have opening statements just like you see on television, and you'd have a trial. So that's the process that you'd have to go through. So, if you saw some value in this video, click the thumbs up button below. And if you'd like to learn more about things that I discuss for personal injury victims, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.